Thanks for coming. So I want to talk about content during this presentation, and most particularly descriptive content, like inventory content for hotels, guided tours, cruise ships, whatever that happens to be. And I want to talk about specifically being able to automate the process of creating, translating, and delivering that content to your end consumer. So that's what the rise of the robots is about. You may not have heard of SDL itself. That's because we are the company behind a lot of the world's largest travel companies. In fact, over 40 of the world's largest brands are our customers, over half of the world's top 10 airlines, half of the world's hotel chains, and a lot of the world's most popular travel websites, including 2 of the very top 3. What we do for them is illustrated on the right here, lots of things, everything from translation through to structured content management. We have web content management. We have machine learning involved in this whole cycle. We can even advise on business process for you, should you wish. But today I want to talk about content automation and the content chain. The content chain is that process of moving your words from creation through translation and delivering it to your customers. And in particular, I want to talk about a few aspects of this. Firstly, the manual processes that are prevalent today, and I'm sure what most of your businesses already do. I want to talk about how you would automate nearly all of those processes. I want to refer to what I call personal versus relevant content, and then give you a hint of what the future of content will look like. And by future, I just mean maybe 2 years from now, not 10 years from now. So let me start with this. Here we have a customer who wants to go on a trip. And let's assume, for argument's sake, that she's Spanish. She wants to book a hotel in London. And in order to market this hotel to this customer, we have to go through, in the travel industry, a huge number of processes in order to get the information about this property in front of her. It starts usually with the content team somewhere, whether that's within your business or you bring in content feeds from outside. Somebody is writing a description about this hotel. They'll be gathering facts and images, and they'll put that together in a little sort of mini descriptive form, ready to deliver to the customer. This is usually done in English. Unfortunately, she's Spanish. She doesn't understand English very well. So what the industry has to do is put all of that stuff into a content management system, flag the fact that Spanish is required, copy that content back out in an Excel spreadsheet, put it into an email, send it off to the translation team. Once it reaches them, they go through 35 manual steps to convert that piece of content in the spreadsheet into the Spanish language, or whatever language you require. These are those steps. I won't go into them in detail. But what happens ultimately is they update the spreadsheet with Spanish, put it back into an email, send it back to the content team, and here we've got Spanish. Well, that's all very cool, except it's not in front of the customer yet. What we have to do is send it to the web team. Now, the web team maintains a main version of the website, usually in English or whatever the native language is. And in order to put this content onto this, they have to make a copy of this particular, let's say, page or marketing presentation onto the Spanish version of the website. These copies are often exactly that. They are copies of one another. They are not linked in any way. They might even be in different servers in different countries, run by different teams. But once we get it onto the Spanish website, it's at this point that we get the attention of our customer. Oh my God, yeah? I mean, seriously, long, slow, it takes days, it's very expensive, there's a lot of people involved, there's manual process of copying and pasting stuff. This is not what you want, people. But this is what most of us do in the travel business. There may be automation in particular parts, but fundamentally, this is the process of the content chain as it exists today. I want to talk about how to automate this process. And I'm going to start by automating content creation, automating the writing of that content. Yes. And we're going to do it using artificial intelligence. Let's start with what everyone would understand would be a very typical piece of content for a hotel. It's what you might call Expedia style. You know, it's that stuff that it converts very well on a particular website. This content is what I call information-led. That is, it's basically a bunch of facts about the hotel that are put together in human sentences, yeah? Now, this is a hotel, but it could equally apply to cruise ships, rental cars, guided tours, whatever. It's just a whole bunch of facts. We have this. We have this. You can do this. You can do this. Meet us here. Pick up here. Take you here. You see, it's information, information. There's no inspiration in this content. Yeah? It's not sink your toes into the beach and enjoy the sunny skies. It's just information. And this is what we create most of within the travel industry. Facts about our inventory. Now, the reason it's like this is because the biggest websites in the world have written it like this, and they have written it like this because they are all test-driven e-commerce businesses. They have tested and tested sentence length, order of words, what to put in here. This is the best converting piece of content for a hotel in the e-commerce world today. That's why it's like that. That's why you should write yours like this. At SDL, we have lots of technologies and services to create content, translate it, and deliver it to our customers. What we've done is calculate how much it costs to create this single piece of hotel description, let's say around 100 words, in 8 different languages, of roughly $22. It takes about 2 days to do. By the time it's written, being sent to the translator, copied on spreadsheets, and turned around. And which means for a very modest inventory of around 100,000 hotels, you've already spent $2.2 million on this content. Except this piece of content didn't. It cost $5 to create. It was done in 3 seconds, and for the modest inventory, you would have only spent $500,000. Why? Because we've used robots. Machine learning to create this content, this exact piece of content, was not written by a human, it was written by a robot. What we've done at SDL is the following. Your business, has a database of facilities and amenities information, codes, you know, the code for Wi-Fi, the code for minibar. What we have at SDL is we send those codes to a robot in the cloud, to an artificial intelligent machine in the cloud that's been trained to write a hotel description using a process called natural language generation. It then creates in real time, as you're watching here, this description from those facts. The top fact is a geocode, which creates the location information, and then the hotel facilities and the room facilities, and then that would get sent back to your database where you would be serving it up to your customers. Seconds. Plus, being SDL, we've been in the machine translation business for 15 years. We can translate that into 45 languages in seconds. No more sending it into spreadsheets off to the translation team, waiting for it to come back, etc. It just happens. That's why it's so cheap to do. That's why it's so quick to do. Let's move on to that localization piece in a little bit more detail. Now, all of you here who are involved using machine translation at one level or another are probably using something called statistical machine translation. It's a process of machine translation that's been around a long time. And it fundamentally says, when you're translating one phrase into another, let's say, the view is beautiful, into another language, what's happening in the machine is that it's trying to statistically compare the best translation of the view is beautiful into the other language, using a whole range of possible translations within that language. It basically says, statistically, this phrase can be translated to this phrase best. Not perfect, might not even be right, but statistically it's the best phrase, the best translation. What's happened in the last couple of years is a move towards something quite amazing, which is neural machine translation. So this uses something called neural networks. And it's the artificial intelligence technology behind things like self-driving cars, number plate recognition, flying planes, wherever you're starting to see these new developments in artificial intelligence. And it's quite easy to understand, but what's actually happening inside the box is really amazing. It's worked on the principle of patterns. Language is a pattern, yeah? A pattern that can be described as a sequence of numbers. So in a neural machine translation, an input pattern, which in this case happens to be English, we want to translate into a pattern of Spanish. What we really mean is that we want the meaning of English to appear in the meaning in Spanish, the pattern that has the meaning in Spanish. And what happens is this input pattern goes through something called a recurrent neural network. A whole bunch of mathematics happens, and it extracts not numbers that represent words from the input, but it creates numbers that represent meaning from that input. It understands, if you like, the meaning of this phrase within the domain of travel, for example. And it encodes this in this internal state. We don't care what that state is. It only sits with the machine. And then a second recurrent neural network decodes this internal meaningful state into a pattern which we call Spanish. I hope that makes sense. Pattern into pattern, but throughout that process, meaning is maintained. And this is why neural machine translation is a complete revolution beyond what statistical machine translation it does today. You can even imagine not too far in the distant future of using a slightly different neural network that recognizes images and the contents of images, and it has the pattern and decodes it into a description. So for those of you with guided tours, you just hold up a photo of the Eiffel Tower to your robot, and it creates the content that it sees, the factual content that it sees, in whatever language you happen to do. This doesn't exist quite not today, but there are working examples around. Right, we've automated content creation, we've automated content localization. What about automating content delivery? So what we're talking about here is that poor, struggling web content team that has to make those copies of websites from one language into another, yeah? How can we automate that process? At SDL, we have a web content management technology called Tridion. And it's, one of its star features is something we call blueprinting. And it works in quite a simple way. You start with a website, and what blueprinting does, it identifies the various components of that website. The logo area, the campaign part, feature content, the booking app, that's the little e-commerce widget, if you like. It identifies those elements. It then makes those elements available to the relevant part of the business. And so probably for the first time, the content team doesn't have to raise a ticket with IT simply to get content published. It does it itself. That team does it itself. The developer team takes care of the app side of things, and the design team takes care of the design of it. It's all, if you like, templated. That in itself is cool enough, but what is really cool and what makes blueprinting particularly important is bringing these bits together and then creating that second language instance of the website. Let's say it's French that we want this time. At SDL, with blueprinting, we imbue the content with intelligence. Each, if you like, is treated as a little piece, a little tiny robot that understands what it is. I am a piece of words, I am a photograph. It understands where it is in the hierarchy of the website, and it understands the language that it needs to be in. So that if you update the English content and you want it to go to the French website, that little widget of content knows it needs to get a French translation done for itself, sends off that request through the translation management system that we have, and then returns it in French. You can approve it if you wish, or let it go, whatever you like. But it's smart assets. An asset is a word or a photograph. It is smart assets that are triggered with something that changes. And that change is cascaded through this content hierarchy. There's not copies here. If you like, they're all instances of the same website. It's just that one instance is in English, one instance is in French, one instance can be in Arabic, there it goes, doing all of the updates. It also means that when you completely change the design, let's say moving from left to right to left languages, such as Arabic here, the design changes, but the content and the hierarchy doesn't change. The only thing that's changed, if you like, is the language. Each little piece of content understands where it is, what it needs to do, based on the triggers that happened. Which means that finally you don't really need huge resources in the IT department anymore to keep your website updated. The content team updates the content, and the content itself is smart enough to update itself across the website hierarchy. Or the app team updates the app, and the app is migrated across the hierarchy in the language required for that particular interface. It's something that one of our customers, Emirates, did. When they first started implementing blueprinting, they delivered 30 websites in just 8 weeks. They're now something like 4 or 5 times that number across all of their brands, internal and external websites. You can imagine this flow of information and intelligence just happens across that web content network. So, that's automating the content chain. But why is automating so important? Why bother? You've got it working right now. Obviously, you can save a bit of time and save a lot of money, potentially. But why really do it? Why go to the hassle of changing all of your processes simply to automate the content chain? Well, the reason is to do with relevancy. So in the travel industry, we know all about personalizing content, yeah? And there's lots of companies that will help you to personalize content here. I will argue personalized content is something that was fun and good to do maybe 5 years ago. Now it's about relevant content. What's relevant? This is a screenshot from my personal Amazon account, yeah? As you can see, I like electronic stuff and space stuff. So the top line is personal, relevant stuff for me, based on my purchase history, based on my wish list, etc. I happen to once have bought a toy for a young child, just once. And from now on, I keep getting recommendations from Amazon for this toy. It is not relevant to me now. It was relevant to me when I bought it, but it's not relevant to me now. That's the difference, yeah? It's relevant content is content that is used for what's happening in the moment, what's happening now. That's what you need to be delivering to your customers, yeah? Why? Because relevant content adds value to the conversation. It doesn't make you look stupid, It makes you look like you are plugged into what your customer is doing right now, why they're doing it. It adds trust to your brand. And that relevant content is considered to be authentic and believable. Even if it's written by a robot, it's relevant to the current conversation with your customer. So how does the travel industry do relevant today? Well, we've got search engines. You can search for relevant hotels and relevant cities. And it's got recommendation engines. Customers who like this hotel also like this one. We've got mobile websites and apps, so it can at least be sort of somewhat personal based on your personalization software, etc., and purchase history and so on. And I know you can't see this. It is fuzzy, but these are the filters from Expedia and Booking.com, yeah? If you want a hairdryer in your room, one of these little tick boxes is going to say hairdryer, yeah? Why would you choose hairdryer? Because it's relevant to you as the person staying there. No one else may choose hairdryer. We probably wouldn't, but the point is that someone thinks that hairdryers are relevant, yeah? And then when you actually get to the thing you're buying in travel, the thing you're probably paying hundreds, if not thousands of euros for, this is the description that you're faced with. It's short, It's informational, but it's not relevant at all unless you look for something that might be relevant to you. And if anyone can see hairdryer in here, I can't. So instantly, this is not relevant description for me. What am I getting at here? And I understand why this is. It's because content in travel is a big blob. It's a blob of words, and it's a blob of pictures or video that sits in a database, yeah? And everyone who comes past your website gets served with the same blob of content every time, yeah? It's static. It doesn't do anything. It may be translated, but it's still a blob of stuff that you serve up to your customer, yeah? And you've got to ask the question, in the age of relevant content with things like Spotify and Netflix and all of the other consumer services that deliver relevancy to you, I've got to ask the question, is your business becoming irrelevant in the age of relevant content? And do words really matter anyway? Yeah? What do I mean? Well, if you take a description, the top 3 conversion factors of a website is nothing to do with the words. You've got images, number 1, in video, yeah, that will convert. Social proof, huge conversion factor, you've got to have that. And something called the digital experience. That is, how quick the website loads, what it looks like, how professional it is, how the information is laid out, the experience digitally. Where are the words in those top 3 converting factors? Why bother creating all of this content, spending all of this money, and $2.2 million for 100,000 hotel inventory? What's the point? Well, words are important in certain cases. It's a primary data set for SEO. It also, language dictates purchasing behavior. 90% of people will choose to view content in their native language. Well, of course they would, you know? Or 60% of people in Japan and France will not buy from your website if it's not in their language. It just makes sense. So obviously words are important here too in language and purchasing. But what is really important to get? These things. Voice-activated assistants. They only have words. Gone are the photos. Gone is the social proof. Gone is the digital experience. All you are left with is words. So ladies and gentlemen, in this part of the 21st century, words become more important than anything else. In fact, David Kong, CEO at Best Western, said, Amazon Alexa to me right now is the future. Right now everyone's into messaging, and the future is going to be about artificial intelligence and voice. Yeah? Voice activation. Relevancy in content, in words, how do you do that? Well, you create content in real time based on what's happening for the user. If this person happens to be going on vacation, you create a piece of text that's relevant to a vacation. If she happens to be going on business, you create a piece of text relevant to the business. It's the same person going to the same hotel in the same city, but for 2 very different reasons. That's relevancy, and it's only possible to create relevant content in real time based on what they want in that moment. I hope you can understand this. So I want to sum up that machine learning and content today is not just about creating, translating, delivering. It's about content that adapts itself to the person who is looking at it. It's about content that's relevant to who they are, where they are, and why they are doing something. It's content created from attributes. It's powered by data and context. And it's done in real time, in whatever language you happen to be in. So automating the content chain is about lowering costs and improving time to market for sure. It's about breaking down silos across the organization, for sure. But the huge potential is in delivering personalized, relevant content to that connected traveler on their own personal device. Yeah? I'm happy to take questions in the little stand behind us. We're running out of time. There's a little lounge back here. I might have time for a couple of questions. If you do like what you hear, we've got some of our staff here. We'd be happy to meet you at our booth, which is in 6.1, just opposite the robots, believe it or not, the SoftBank robots that are there. And if you want to leave your business card with our staff too, on your way out, they'll be holding up a sign. And we'll get in contact. And of course, your privacy is important to us, and your information will be handled in the context of our privacy policy. This is how to reach us. If there's a question, I'm happy to take it. I'll just wait for the microphone.
Maybe just a technical question. I would like to know, once you translate the text from English into Spanish and all the other languages you mentioned, is it then saved as such? Or every time a user connects, it will just look for the right things and put it together in the same moment?
The answer is both. And the reason is the static or cache text will be used in certain contexts, like your general website. When somebody arrives at your website, it's got to be SEO rich, yeah? SEO really means Googlebot can read it. That's all SEO really means. But when you're delivering content to an individual on their individual device, that would start to be done in real time, yeah? There may be bits like images and other things that would be common, terms and condition type of thing. But describing the inventory, describing the thing they are buying from you, that's the point at which you would start to inject real-time content into the equation. So you'd have both. Yeah. Great. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know, do you have real people that check on the translations, or is it only automated translation? And how do you guarantee that it's like a native speaker has written it?
In translating the actual source itself?
Yeah, like when you translate text content into a foreign language or another language.
Well, that's based on training the actual engines, if that makes sense. So the machine translation engine is trained through a feedback loop in an artificial intelligence scenario to get better and better and better at doing so. It's probably a continual process, but there will become a point where it crosses a threshold from being gibberish to actionable, useful content, useful translation. But that continues to get better. At SDL, we don't release our engines until they pass this threshold. But it's the training itself that dictates the quality of the actual end translation. For some languages, like the Asian languages, statistical machine translation, the kind of older way of doing it, it's still a good way, it finds it very difficult to work with certain languages. German is one as well. Neural machine translation doesn't work with the language, it works with the meaning in the language and translates that meaning into the end pattern, which we happen to call German or Finnish or Dutch or whatever it is. So, but that happens by training the neural engine. Yeah.
Hello, thank you again for the presentation. Very, very interesting. I wanted to go a bit into the numbers because language is extremely important also for SEO purposes. And there is always this dilemma, what can you afford to translate? When do you have ROI on a specific language? Yes. So that makes it very interesting also to get in front of more, let's say, international audiences. Having said that, I certainly assume, like you said, it's not there yet on all languages. And also where you're further down the road is certainly not 100%. There might be, like you said, a certain threshold. Do you have, so it's a twofold question. Do you have, within your infrastructure or your partner network, do you have a proofreading team? Because then the budget shift or the investment shift would go from translation to basically investing in the technology, and then from the savings you would have like a human proofreading. Like how does this break down on an operational aspect? And maybe you have an example.
Yes. It's a great question. It actually has a huge answer. The short answer is machine translation is always cheaper because it doesn't involve human. But I would also apply machine translation only to very certain types of content. I would not give your legal documents to a machine, for example. But information-led content, such as inventory descriptions, terms and conditions, that sort of idea, machines do a really good job. Yes, it's true that not all languages are translated to equal quality, but it's also true that that is actually happening. With Neural, it really is moving into that direction, and costs just continue to drop. As far as scaling goes, one of the 3 biggest websites in the world is a user reviews website that we do machine language translation for, billions of words per month, cloud-based, easy to do. Difficult to do, but easy to do. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much.